When we come to Portland Avenue to that church rally that night, they was lined up along the walls, in the vestibule, everywhere. But we didn't know who all was the people. We didn't know the people that came because they was from everywhere around here. When we started back home, I said, oh God, I didn't know there was that many people in the world that serve God. I'd never seen that many in a church. I'd always went to these small churches. We liked it. And my husband said that's an awful long ways to drive. 17 miles is all it was from our house to the church. Kenneth says, yes, but what a difference in the spirit it makes. That settled it right there. So we stayed. We had Brother Cathcart was the pastor then. He left. They got Brother Davison to come. Well, he didn't stay too long, and then Brother Splector came by. Well, he didn't stay long because he was a truck driver, and he couldn't take care of the church and his job too, so he had to give up. Well, they got Brother Davison to come back. He wasn't moved yet. He's still here in Belleville somewhere. I don't know where he was at, but they got him to come back. So after Brother Davison left, they got Brother Miller. He stayed a while. He stayed till he got ready to retire. Stayed quite a few years. And Brother Woods came along. And after that kind of calmed down, everything got straightened while Brother Bollinger came along. And so we had him for, I don't know how long, 2 or 3 years, 5 years. We had him out there, Brother Blake, retired out of the mission field, and he come, and Brother Bollinger told us how good he would be and what it would be like. So he decided, he said, yeah, I'll take the church. So we had him up until he retired.
Well, Brother Cathcart, from what I remember, was a real, well, I call it mild type preacher. He wasn't real loud or anything. And then when Brother Davison come, he was more the exuberant, loud type preacher.
My mom and dad were very close to Brother and Sister Davidson. They was very close to them and thought the world of them. Very good pastor, very good wife, and they even went to visit them different times after they had moved from there.
His mom passed away in 1969. Brother Davidson was the pastor at that time, and he was a very, very kind man. The night that we knew Mom was dying, I called him, and he was there immediately in the middle of the night to be with us.
They just had the vision, I guess, to go out there and build a new church. It was on a lot out there and clear it off and built this church. I know they used a lot of used wood. Most of the work was done by the men in the church that would build the building there on Portland Avenue, yes. Yeah, it was very nice to go to walk into a new sanctuary, yes, just being built. Yeah. So it was nice. Everything new.
Yeah. No theater seats.
No theater seats.
And Brother Miller come, and he was more or less, a mild type preacher, not real loud.
But he could get stirred up.
But he could get stirred up, yeah. But,
one memory that I have, when I first started attending church, Brother Wesley Miller preached a message on you can't serve God and mammon. And I can remember holding on to the pew in front of me as tight as I could, because the power of conviction was so strong in my life that I didn't want to go to the altar because I wasn't ready. So that I can remember as the strongest conviction I've ever felt about salvation.
Sister Miller was very classy. Just, she played the piano. I remember that about her. She had a dry humor. You'd talk to her and she'd have, she'd say something all deadpan and then it was a joke and you'd end up laughing at the end. But she was just very kind. She was kind to everyone. She, worked in the altars, and him, I just always remember he had always put his hands on the side of it, and the pulpit was like worn, whereas his hands were always on the sides of the pulpit, and you could always tell where his hands were. One of his favorite hymns was "Leaning on the Everlasting Arms." He would like to lead that a lot. Grandpa Bullinger was the kindest man. He could tell you like it was, but you thanked him for it because you knew he had your best interests at heart and your, salvation. He'd always, pull out the old songs and he'd get that hand going, when he'd lead. And Grandma, she always felt like she was too old to be a pastor's wife, but everyone loved her so much. And, she would always stand up and say, "I just don't want to ever do anything that would grieve the Holy Ghost out of my heart. And I just want to live pleasing to the Lord." And everybody just loved her.
So my Uncle Wesley Miller pastored the church here at that time in 1979 when we first visited. Actually, it was December of '78. I remember that walking in, we were late, it was hard to find, but walking in, one of the first impressions I had was there were very few young people our age. Most everybody, with the exception of one couple and another single girl, everybody had gray hair.
Grade, like we are now.
Like we are now. They were gray-headed people, yes, but they had great impact on our lives and the lives of our children.
We were the youth group. I mean, we were the kids. There wasn't a lot of kids back then. And so we were always on the second row because Dad played the organ. And so Mom sat on the second row and us kids lined up beside her. My little brother Ryan, he was always making his rounds. He made his rounds and made sure he had to talk to the Yingles and everybody.
And we was upstairs in the apartment building, and it was Brother Terry Russell. So he was the young married's Brother Terry Russell.
We had a dear Iola Clayton. She was from O'Fallon, and she was our secretary, and she kept, very meticulous notes. Had all of our ledgers on, handwritten, and she always wrote who was here preaching, who the pastor was when they were voted in. She always had it, all that stuff written down, which we still have today, which is good to have. But she was the treasurer until, was it 1984?
She was precious, and I remember Sister Dawn telling the story that Sister Clayton would tell Dawn. You testify, because every time you testify, you kick the devil,
Iola Clayton, my Sunday school teacher, she was really strict on learning Sunday school stuff. And we would have a whole quarter, and she'd make sure you learned it over and over and over. And then at the end of the quarter, she'd make you take a test. And you better know it.
When we first started going to Bethel Temple at 708 Portland Avenue, the front part of the sanctuary was all paneling, dark paneling, which was very common and popular back then. And then, so it was, we had red carpet actually when we got married. There was bright red carpeting. And over the years, there was a lot of improvements on the property. So
the church seemed really big and imposing at the time, which it's not at all. It's actually a very, very small building.
There was a little bit of a foyer there. I'd say maybe 15 to 20 feet, maybe, probably. And that was pretty narrow, maybe about 6 to 8 feet wide. So yeah, that was one of the things when we moved here. We wanted a big foyer because that other one was so small. Once a couple people got in it, there was pretty much nobody getting out.
There wasn't a lot of space. There wasn't a lot of space outside, so we would do fundraisers or like some things in the side parking lot, but it was mostly street parking. You were parking outside of people's houses because the church was placed right in the middle of a neighborhood, so it was all houses, very small street, very, very small. Now looking back, very, very small.
So we'd have parking slots all pulled in, and then people would pull in behind them. And so yeah, it was fun sometimes getting out of there.
The building was small and the parking lot was terrible. We had to park sometimes, yeah. The parking was
it
terrible.
motivated you to come early.
Yeah.
But the church was, what we would consider old-fashioned now, all wood up front, knotty pine wood.
Back then, Sister Shirley Ledbetter and Brother Gibbs, they were our song leaders, so they took, kind of turns doing that. And one of the favorite songs Sister Shirley would do is the Royal Telephone. Us kids always liked that.
We didn't get drums till I was 16 when I brought a drum set there after Brother Blake had came, and we finally got a drum set. Before that, we had a bunch of tambourines. So it wasn't great at setup for sound in there, but we made do with it and made it work.
Brother Gibbs led worship as long as I can remember. He always had his 3 songs or whatever, and just did the led us, and he, when he wasn't leading, he was out dancing. We call it the Charleston. He'd get out and do the Charleston.
Every time he would lead worship, almost he would end it with a dance. He would always come off the platform dancing, and he didn't grow up in church, and he always said that when he was young, he danced, in the dance halls and all that stuff. And he said when he came to the Lord, he gave that to God, and he wanted to dance for Him.
He was passionate about worship and and at that time it was a lot of hymns that we sang. That's something that stands out to me in terms of worship, and something I've tried to carry through, to my adulthood.
Sister Greathouse is another one. I always remember, of course she preached. I always loved to hear her preach, but she would come into church on a Sunday night and she said, "I've come expecting." She was expecting something from the Lord. And then she'd say, "Girls, you got your dancing shoes on?" When they recarpeted the church, they did not bolt down the pews. And so me and Melanie, and I don't know who else, the young people, we'd get to shout in church and song service, and we'd do this back and forth shout, and the pew would end up all the way up at the altar. And so then when preaching would start, we'd go grab it and pull it back.
Okay, I did children's church and Sunday school, and here is a picture of me dressing up like the devil. And I went around and I had a bag, and in the bag it said different things for us to, for the devil to tempt us with. And then the kids was in this skit also, and they had a black box right up front, and they started singing the song, "The Devil Was a Sly Old Fox," and they chased me around trying to get me so I wouldn't be given this, any of these little notes to do stuff. So I got it, they got me in that box and went outside, and here's where the kids were all excited to get that devil outside. And they locked the door and threw away the key on me.
Oh, we loved it. No matter where we went. We had church at Stephen Becky's home, for quite a while.
We had a refrigerator box that Mom covered with some fabric, and I think she there was a cross on the front of it, and so it was the pulpit. Grandpa would open his Bible and preach from that.
But we rented a place where they had sold a fish, and they called us the fish house people. But we had some still good church.
Honestly, I don't ever remember selling fish to the fish house. I think it had been vacant for a while, but they remodeled it, You could tell the building used to be a restaurant, and we had wonderful services, We didn't, everything kept going strong. That was one thing about our church family. We were all so close, there wasn't a generation gap. Everybody was close, from the youngest to the oldest. And no matter what we went through, we came out on top because of God, Amen. Not because of us.